Well, hey, we've had a lot of people ask about how to propagate African violets. And so I thought we'd do something just a little bit different today. We're out here in one of the production greenhouses. This greenhouse that we're currently in is actually just right at an acre in space. And so, yeah, this is definitely a production video. I've got water on my shirt, but I'm gonna deal with the question of how to propagate African violets. And there's a couple of things that we're going to do, a couple different ways. And then the other thing I want to show you is how to make sure that your African violet blooms. Just a little bit of a trade secret there that you can use in the home and pretty well keep your African violet blooming most of the time. So with that being said, let's take a look at this particular plant right here. And we're going to address the first way that you could propagate an African violet. As I look at this plant here, and first of all, I'm going to take the pot off of it. And we see that we've got several actual little plants right here. Now, a lot of people would say, well, maybe we should just divide this up. And I don't think that's really the answer here. I think what we will do is we'll take the shear and we'll just trim off this plant right here and separate it like that. You'll see, because it's growing so close to the ground, I've actually got some roots that are actually on it. And so we're going to take that and we're going to set it aside. We'll do the same thing here because I see that there's at least 3 and possibly 4 plants here. And then here's another. Which leaves me with one small plant right here. And I think in the case of this one, I'm going to go ahead and just trim it off as well. And then you could actually hold on to this and it would probably regrow. In our case right here, because it doesn't really have that much value in the greenhouse, we're just going to dispose of this. But it's entirely possible you could hang on to this, and you've got 3 to 4 different shoots here that would go ahead and grow a new plant if you're patient. But let's talk about how we're going to propagate and put roots onto these small plants that we've taken off of this plant. Okay, well, I think what we want to address here is how we're going to best propagate these little plants, which don't have any roots. And I always recommend, it's not that you have to, but most of the time you want to use the rooting hormone. And a very easy product to get. You can get it in probably any plant store. Certainly we have it available at the plant farm. But it's just nothing more than a root powder. And all of our cuttings like this, we're going to want to use a root powder on them. It's very simple. We'll just get a little bit of powder up against the stem right here, and then just insert the plant itself right into the pot. Now you'll notice that I'm just using the lid just for the sake of being able to see from the fertilizer container. And you could use anything to hold your root on. I'm just going to put a little bit of root powder on the base of the stem, and then insert the plant right into the pot. You don't have to be real careful. This is a fairly strong stem, and the soil is very soft, and so we're just going to set it on the surface of soil and press it in. And looking at this one here, I see that I've got actually a couple of little plants here, so I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that. And I'll do that taking my shear and reaching up onto this stem section right here and trim it right here. Separate the 2 plants. Got 2 different crowns there. And this remaining crown is quite large, but this one here is a secondary crown. And it's just as good as any of these others that we put here. With that being said, we took 1 plant and we've turned it into 6. So anyway, that's one way of propagating your African violets. I'm going to show you another way that's a lot easier, and it's not quite as quick, but you can make a lot more plants in a hurry with this new way, and that'll be with just using a leaf cutting. Now, a lot of people will ask us, how's the best way to keep my African violet healthy and keep it growing and blooming? I'm going to show you that. First of all, you'll see that we've got a couple of different kind of fertilizers here. One is a general purpose plant food. This is Jack's. We like Jack's in the retail store. We actually use a commercial type of Jack's in our own greenhouse, our own commercial greenhouse. But you can buy this. It's all prepared for you to get across the counter. And this is formulated especially for your house plants, of which African violet is a house plant. And then here's one that's specifically or specially formulated for African violets. And in both cases, you're going to want to just read the instructions on the back. All fertilizers are basically the same. They're going to have some nitrogen, some phosphorus, and potash, but it's the ratios of those different elements that are in the fertilizer that kind of give us what we're looking for a particular type of plant. With the African violets being specialized like they are, these are loaded up a little bit heavier in the case of the available phosphate, which is what's going to cause us to create our blooms and our large leaves. Now, one last thing I want to show you, though, is how do I get my African violet blooming and how do I keep it blooming? And this is just a trick. Learned this years ago when I was just a little kid from a lady, a grandmother who had passed on an African violet to my mom. So how old that plant was, I have no idea. I do know that my mom had it in her house for about 35 or 40 years before she finally got tired of it and just threw it out. But she had her African violet would bloom all the time because she would go into the sink and she would get the hottest water that she could out of the tap. And then she would just pour it at the base, not on the top, but at the base of the African violet and let it sit in that water for 15 minutes to a half hour so that it would have a chance to absorb the water from the base and come up. All of that warm water would just shock those roots just enough to cause that plant to come into bloom over and over and over again. So that's just a little trick as how to keep your African violet blooming. Well, we're back here in the greenhouse. We picked a great day to be out here. We've got people in the background that are pulling orders because this is an early spring day. We've got the sun is shining and the rain is falling, so you can hear a little bit of the background rain on the roof, the plastic roof of the greenhouse. But we're out here, we're propagating African violets. And I wanted to do it out here in the greenhouse so you can see a little bit of what we do on a commercial basis. We're primarily a bedding plant grower out here. And so we've got this particular house is about an acre filled with a variety of different bedding plants. So with this African violet, the first thing we want to do if we're going to propagate using a leaf and a stem cutting, is we're actually just going to we're going to trim that leaf off. And I've already done quite a few of these. Right now I'm just thinking about in terms of how am I going to shape this plant up so that I don't ruin the way it looks. It's still a nice quality plant. I've just taken some of the leaves off of it, and I think that's good enough for me at this point for this plant. So we'll set that aside. We've got quite a few different leaves. I think the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to trim this long stem section off. And I'm going to leave somewhere around 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of stem left on these leaves. Now, if you look to the side here, you see that I've already taken some of the little variegated African violet right here. It's like one of the smaller compact ones. And there's 24. We've stuck actually 25 cuttings right here in this 105 plug tray. And if you're trying to do a lot of African violet cuttings, this is probably the direction you want to go. Okay, well, I've already put a bunch of root tone on a lot of these leaves, but real simple. We're just going to put a little bit of root tone right here on the stem. Make sure we get a little bit right there on the base of the leaf. And the first thing we're going to do is stick that in. Now, you notice I went ahead and orientated these all the same. There's nothing that says you have to do that. I'm just one of these people that likes to everything facing the same way. So it doesn't help the plant grow any more than it would already, but it just ends up looking a little more orderly as the plants are developing. So the last one here that I've got, I need to put root tone on. These have already all got root tone on them. I just set them in the tray like this. Like I said, we've got 105 cells in this tray. We're not going to come anywhere close to filling that up. But there's enough being done here that you can see the process of how we would propagate and how we do it occasionally propagate. We don't really do very many of these African violets unless they're unbranded African violet. But a lot of us have got in our homes, we've got heirloom plants that, you know, our grandmother might have had, maybe our mom had. In some cases, I was talking to a lady the other day. She was able to track her plant down to 130 years, going all the way back into Ireland. And so a lot of times, you know, we've got these heirloom plants and we want to keep them growing, and then we also want to share them with people. And so this is a way to make, you know, quite a few plants in a hurry. A couple of advantages you have here: it's a smaller root ball, and so the end result is you'll be able to better control the amount of water that's in the soil, and it'll aerate that much quicker, which is conducive to good root development. Well, as you can see, I went ahead and removed my plant here from the hot water, and I went ahead and inserted the other one. I'm going to let that sit there for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll pull it out. I've no doubt that we come back in about 4 to 6 weeks, and there'll be a whole new set of blooms that are coming up inside these plants.